Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 173.
And Wi-Fi is something, for me, it's something new, and others might laugh if they've been doing it for 20 years, but for me, it's exciting.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Well, Arne, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. It's very early this morning, but I'm
Sorry.
really glad to speak to you. And
I guess I made it convenient for me, but...
Oh, no, this is the sun has been up for a while, so I'm ready to roll, have my coffee.
Beautiful.
Let's get cracking.
Yeah, absolutely. So introduce yourself, where you're at, and kind of what you do in the Wi-Fi space.
Right, so my name is Arne Bier. I live in Australia, in Brisbane. That's on the east coast of Australia. And I guess I'm probably one of those citizen of the world type of people. I grew up in South Africa. I'm originally South African, but I've lived in UK and Germany for a while, and now I'm living in beautiful Brisbane.
Wow.
And I've been in the IT industry since about 1996. Bit of an old-timer. I started my career in enterprise LAN, token ring, if anyone still remembers that stuff. I was doing ATM, or asynchronous transfer mode, back in the day. So I did a CCIE WAN switching the year 2000.
Okay.
I've still recertified that ever since. But I've done MPLS, VoIP, NMS. The last little bit there was network access control, so Radius for large service providers. I've spent most of my life in service provider world. Yeah, so I've kind of moved into wireless through Radius because of the network access control component, 802.1x and MAB and those kind of things. And at the moment, I'm working for a system integrator, or VAR. We're a Cisco Premier partner, Aruba Gold partner, and we specialize in education, warehousing, health sectors, and SMB.
And is it primarily in Australia, or does that take you all over the world as well?
We do cover all of Australia, but also New Zealand. I don't think we've gone beyond that. So just, Australia, New Zealand territory.
I guess it'd be a little expensive to fly you out to California for...
Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think my bosses would be, beyond sending us maybe to sort of parts of Asia or Australasia as well. But we primarily service just Australian and New Zealand customers.
In your perspective, what do you like? What kind of stands out for you in the wireless space compared to your background with networking and everything?
I think that's something new to me. I have to admit, I'm maybe compared to some of the other listeners on the podcast, I'm relatively new to wireless. I've only really sort of touched controllers and got into the config and design and thinking about wireless in the last 3 years. And because nothing ever gets old or stale in IT, you have to recycle yourself. And I could have maybe gotten stuck in the service provider world if I'd stuck with my previous job and just done the same old thing. And Wi-Fi is something, for me, it's something new, and others might laugh if they've been doing it for 20 years, but for me, it's exciting. I was just doing an OmniPeak trace the other day, and I was looking at the protocols going, that kind of reminds me of when I started my career in token ring and decoding one station talking to another station at the lowest level, and now I'm doing it with wireless. It's kind of a bit of a same old thing, but it's very, very different as well. And that's what I think is exciting. It's so much to learn and so humbling to know that I know so little about this thing.
Yeah, everyone I talk to, it's always like, as soon as they learn more, it just tells them how much they still don't know. And it seems like the learning never stops for even the best Wi-Fi or the most experienced Wi-Fi engineers.
That's right.
So what are you doing then to really immerse yourself in Wi-Fi? What's kind of been your journey as far as, is it certifications for you? Is it just relying on your ability to learn new things? What has that looked like for you?
Yeah, so apart from the old baptism of fire, where you get chucked in the deep end, which is a good boost to get you going. I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable way of getting going, but Put it this way, if somebody put a book in front of me and said, just learn about Wi-Fi without having a reason to do it, in other
Hmm.
words, you have to go to a customer site next week and troubleshoot something, that gives you a real kick up the bum, and I, it's uncomfortable at the time, but in hindsight, it's a very good way of learning. I've just embarked on the CWNA course. I
Okay.
bought the book and started reading it, and I've done CCNA wireless, I've done the Aruba mobility professional, and I've passed all those exams, but I don't feel it's ever given me the foundation. And when you read the CWNA book, you just realize these guys, there's a lot more that you can put into the theory that people should know. And I've heard this on the podcast many times over. People keep plugging CWNP, but
Hmm.
it really is. It is a very good foundation for anyone. And I'm not saying don't read the other books, but it almost reads like a university textbook sometimes. It sort of reminds me of a course in
Yeah.
physics or whatnot. It's really well written.
What's been, you think, your biggest challenge in all of this?
The biggest challenge is keeping everything in mind. So let's put sort of design to one side. So design is something that I think for me, would be the ultimate challenge, because there you have to put a lot of theory into practice,
Hmm.
and people are counting on your theory to be correct. And it's not like we go to engineering school and learn how to build bridges properly. We're all sort of assimilating knowledge
Yeah.
from various places. But in my space right now, where I'm looking at things from a, let's say, reactive or troubleshooting versus fix it kind of approach,
Yeah.
there are so many aspects to keep in mind when you're doing something, because Wi-Fi is such a finicky and tricky subject to pin down, and every vendor does it differently. So you might have someone who knows Cisco very well, but you might put them in front of an Aruba controller and they start to wobble. And I'm talking about myself. Sometimes, I know one product better than the other. And so you have to not only understand the vendor stuff, and there's so many vendors, and I'm only picking on the two big ones, but let's say Aruba and Cisco, they're quite similar, but quite different at the same time. So good foundation of knowledge, and then implementing it when you're sitting with a customer and they're expecting you to know what you're doing. I find that quite challenging.
What skill set do you think has given you an advantage to be able to pull this off over the last couple of years? Because obviously you put a big challenge in front of you, but you are doing it. So what do you think gave you kind of that edge?
I have to admit, I'm a bit of a geek. So I love my job. I love doing these things. That's the first thing. If I got out of bed in the morning, I thought, oh my God, I've got to do this wireless stuff, then I would hate doing it. But on the other hand, I love doing it. So that's the primary thing. The other thing is I've always enjoyed studying anything new. I'm curious.
Hmm.
So having a curiosity for anything helps you to get through if you ask my wife, she would say that stuff is boring
Yeah.
because she doesn't understand, what being a geek is all about. But that's why, it gets me through. And the other thing is having a home lab, and this is probably like a recurring theme, that you have to have your little playpen and your safe environment where you can test things out
Yeah.
and just not learn at the customer's expense, but just try things out and study and write blogs and whatnot. So I think that's helped a lot.
What kind of things have you been interested in and kind of doing deeper dives on, maybe in the home lab or just things that you've been running into on the field?
Might not sound that interesting, but because I have more of an interest in network access control, I'm always interested in learning more about EAP methods. So, for example, there are lots of nerd knobs around, like EAP TLS
Yeah,
and EAP
yeah.
PEEP, that I would like to explore. Optimizations about making things happen more efficiently, like um, fast retransmissions, or sorry, any kind of optimizations around that. So I would sit in the lab and test these things out with my iPhone and see what happens when you tick this box or check that box, and playing around with the radius server and playing around on the wireless controller to see what happens when I, turn this thing on or off. There is so much to explore. I haven't even gotten onto things like, AC yet. I've got a very old AP at home that just does ADA 211A and G pretty much, and N
Hmm.
maybe. So it's just basic stuff for me at the moment. But I want to learn from the ground up, and then by the time AX hits the shelves, there's something new to learn. But I haven't even understood all the other stuff yet.
So you have your older certifications going through the CWNP program. Other areas or other things that you're using to kind of enhance and grow in your learning?
I've got a Safari Books online subscription, which I've had for the last 3 years, and it's something in terms of my personal investment.
Yeah.
It's not something my employer gives me. It's something that I pay for every year, and it's money well spent, to be honest, because every book I ever wanted, except funny enough, the latest CWNA is not on there. So I had to buy the book from the US and have it shipped here, but
Oh man.
everything else is on there. Yeah, and there's videos, there's all sorts of online content. I think that's a really valuable resource to have. There's YouTube channels. There's just too much stuff on the internet that, you know, I would never have a life if I just spent absorbing all these things that are available. And of course, podcasts, the classic thing that you do when you drive to work or
Yeah.
commute to work is to listen and absorb. So I do it all the time. I listen to at least 3 or 4 different podcasts on my commutes.
How is the life balance as far as unplugging from work, and what are you doing to just kind of get away from all of that? Or are you always absorbed?
It is tricky, I have to admit. I do have a child, a family, and when I come home, she jumps all over me, and she's still quite young, and you have to learn to switch off from that, and it's a great distraction. I think having a small child is a great distraction from your work stresses.
Yeah.
But then later on in the evenings, when things quieten down, you do think, oh, there was that thing I was going to read about more. I'm wondering if I should just read about that quickly. And it's very, very tough. So
And down the rabbit hole.
yeah, so when I go on holiday, I'm sometimes tempted to read the emails and but it's just best to switch it all off and just disconnect from it. You have to, and it took me a while, but I do feel that if I do switch off on holidays, I feel a lot more recharged. But it's always in the back of my mind. There's always some issue I'm trying to solve in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's normal or not, but
I think it is. So a question I've been asking is early on, or maybe it didn't have to be that early on, but a particular mistake you made that maybe taught you something valuable.
wow, how much time do you have?
We got all the time in the world, buddy.
Yeah. Look, I guess I would caveat in saying this is what I did earlier on in my career. I've become a lot more cautious lately, but I've brought down service provider networks in the past because there was one cable provider in the UK, and I did an upgrade very confidently
Yeah.
one evening, and I brought the whole network down because I didn't read the release notes about minimum requirements. That kind of taught me to study the release notes very carefully. So whenever a vendor brings out a new version of code, I just kind of get a feeling in the back of my head to say, hey, read the release notes, please. And usually in the caveat section is where I go to first because I kind of got burnt with that.
Mm-hmm.
Other things is DevOps is really all the rage these days. People try and automate everything. But I did that early on in my career as well. And I had one customer case where we had to patch memory and ATM switches. And me being young and enthusiastic, I wrote a script to do it. And my mentor, who was a much more senior and experienced guy, said, no, Arne, we're going to do this manually. And I was really annoyed with him at the time. The patching went well. I was annoyed, so I went back to the lab to test my script a bit more. And it turned out that I'd made a gross mistake. I would have probably corrupted the whole network again. So again, this is just like lessons learned. Just temper your enthusiasm sometimes, especially on customer networks. So what that means is just when it's on a customer network, just be a bit more kind of cautious. And when you're young and enthusiastic, it's tricky.
Yeah.
When you get older, it's not that tricky.
And again, goes back to that lab. Then have that lab so you can test all these enthusiastic theories.
Yes. Oh, I've got many more horror stories, but yeah.
We don't have to dwell on that. On the flip side of that, what's something you feel like you've done well at, and something that really helped you succeed?
Let's say 6 years ago, I was working with EAP-SIM deployments. So EAP-SIM is one of the EAP methods where we use the SIM card in the phones to authenticate.
Okay.
And service providers around the world are doing it to offload the cellular networks, so all the data traffic from cellular networks onto Wi-Fi networks. And this is kind of where I started getting interested in Wi-Fi, and I was dealing with the Cisco platform that did the AAA, the radio stuff. And the satisfying thing there in that project was to see customers connecting to the Wi-Fi seamlessly, so they would be standing at a train station or being wherever they are in the particular country where I deployed this solution, and they would just be seamlessly connected to the Wi-Fi. There's no portals, there's no authentication. It was all seamless. It was very, very complex in the background, integrating to the home location registers and the kind of cellular side of things. Very, very protocol-driven stuff. But the feedback we got from the customers was, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to do anything, and I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. And there was a lot of work that went in behind the scenes, a lot of coding, scripting, configuring, understanding protocols. So that deep dive technical challenge, which then translated into, the average person in the street just saying, wow, this is amazing, guys. I love it. It just works. Oh my God, do you know what it took to get it to work? You'll never know, but I know, and that kind of makes you feel quite chuffed about the whole thing.
In your role, taking care of issues as they come up, what are some of the common things that you are running into a lot?
Oh, recurring issues. Maybe code quality of certain products, and especially features that one would expect in the year of 2018 should work by now, especially when in the year of 2012, maybe they did work once upon a time and then suddenly it stopped working. So the maturity of vendor code really surprises me sometimes. And I haven't experienced all the different vendors. So maybe there are people out there saying, well, on my Ruckus network, I never have any issues. But I can tell you on the vendors that I've worked on, there are loads of issues. And they probably have a tough job because stuff has gotten so complex. They've got so many different requirements. But as an end user, I would just like, if I'm learning about something like wireless and I'm sitting in my home lab and I'm testing something out and I spend 6 hours troubleshooting something that was a bug and not because of my understanding, then I get quite annoyed. And not to mention the fact that customers also they have business to run and they have problems with simple stuff like 802.1x. Why isn't that stuff working? And now it should just work. So stability of code, I guess, is a big bugbear of mine.
It bugs you, no pun intended.
Yep.
What do the next few years look like for you? What kind of things are you excited about in Wi-Fi and the protocols?
I'm excited about WPA3, mostly because in my world of network access control, I work a lot with open networks, open SSIDs, and a lot of customers don't like that. So WPA3 brings some of that enhancement to have, guest networks to be encrypted from the get-go, which would be a great thing. 802.1x, AX is something I'm pretty excited about because, again, it puts some emphasis on learning a new protocol. I don't know how soon we'll see it, but I guess those two enhancements are something I'm looking forward to, and seeing how reliable these things are. I still remember getting my first Aeronet adapter in year 2000 and plugging it into my laptop, and the thing just worked. And nowadays, there's so many different, and that was just 802.11b. It was very simple A and B. But nowadays, you've got to make a whole bunch of other things work, and seeing how backwards compatible the new products are and protocols are. So, yeah.
What advice would you give to someone, maybe they're a few years behind you where you were starting with getting introduced into they got thrown into the Wi-Fi landscape, maybe with a similar background? What encouragement would you give to them?
I would say it's an amazing technology to immerse yourself in. There is probably an endless supply of things you could learn, opportunities. There is so much bad fi out there. Job prospects look great because there are customers out there that will need, all the things that you learn, you can put into practice and have quite a long career with that. I would say get yourself on the CWNP track, CWNA book. Just get it, start reading it if you haven't already. And there's nothing wrong with the vendor certifications either, because you have to eventually touch some vendor.
Yeah.
So whichever vendor you're working on, align yourself with that, get on the community forums, start to just sort of lurk on the forums, maybe get an RSS feed in your mail. Maybe you're using Outlook, just get an RSS feed to these things. So you don't have to keep going to the forums, but you get these things straight into your email box when new topics appear, and then start contributing to community forums as well. When you have a question, put it in. And then you might find that you start being able to contribute or answer questions on these forums. And so you get sucked into the social media community forums. I find them very helpful myself because you find yourself explaining stuff to other people. You realize sometimes you know things and sometimes you don't know things. And when somebody corrects you on a forum, it's a very valuable exercise and, again, quite humbling, and you'll never forget that. So it's not you don't get flamed or anything, but you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your opinions out there, and if someone corrects you, it sorts you out pretty quickly.
Favorite tools you're using these days, or things that are in your little toolkit that are just standards for you?
I think that Wireshark is my go-to tool. I use it religiously for mostly radius decodes. Because I have a Windows laptop, I haven't really gotten into packet capturing, but all those Mac people out there will tell me to get a MacBook and get cracking with Wireshark and all these other cool things. I found that OmniPeak, which I've started using recently, is very nice. But of course, it's not something I can just sort of lug around in my everyday. I have to sort of use it. It's in our tool set, but we only have one of them. It's a bit of a big hammer to take to a customer site, but when you have to troubleshoot very weird issues, having something like an OmniPeak sniffer is quite good. We have got a Sidekick, which I haven't used yet, and also the Eckhouse site survey is something. I did my first survey the other day, and I was really impressed with the software, and I want to do a few more of those things. So that's my wireless toolkit. Apart from that, I must say that my lab at home is all virtualized except for the AP.
Okay.
So VMware Workstation for me is my top tool. I virtualize anything I can get my hands on. I've even gotten to a point where I've virtualized the wireless stuff, believe it or not. There are tools that can help you pretend to make 802.1x and Radius and TACAX authentications in VMware. So you don't need any equipment. All you need is a machine in VMware, and you can do all sorts of cool things with WPA supplicant. And
do you have that in a blog post? Yeah, I was going to say that would be great to direct people to.
Yeah, I've blogged on my company portal and a company, IPTEL Solutions.
Cool. You know what we'll do is I'll get some of those particular articles. We'll put them in the show notes. So if someone wants to check out your VMware ideas, that would be fun to connect to.
Yes. So I used to call it lab in a laptop, and literally is that. It's for people doing sort of rapid prototyping on radius service policies, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'll include that.
Very cool. And how, if someone's just listening now, Twitter, how can we get a hold of you?
Oh, wow. If I had a follower on Twitter, I wouldn't know. I probably don't. But I'm on Twitter as at sonar_boy. So sonar boy with underscore. And I'm on LinkedIn, but maybe LinkedIn is probably the best way to get hold of me, or they can email me. I don't know if you give out email addresses on podcasts.
It's all up to you. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes as well. So
yes, I'll put that in the show notes.
And I'll say no spamming you, right?
No. But people are welcome to reach out to me if they like.
Absolutely.
To speak to me. Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Arne, for joining us and contributing. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Matthew, thank you very much for the opportunity, and have a great day.
10 Talks.
So this presentation is about the effects of rate limiting on Wi-Fi. Hey, my name is Troy Martin. I'm Troy Mart on Twitter. I have a hashtag down at the bottom that's Wi-Fi with purpose. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. I spend a fair bit of time on airplanes, like I'm sure a lot of you do as well. But there's a commercial that plays every time the plane takes off, and it's about an investing company. And the investment company always ends with the tagline, invest with purpose, right? It's about intelligently investing. And also in Canada, we have a traditional Canadian dish. It's called poutine, and it's in its most simplest form. It's French fries with gravy and cheese curds. It's absolutely delicious. If you come to Canada, have poutine. But on Twitter, there's a Poutine with Purpose Twitter handle. And so I kind of morphed that into the Wi-Fi with Purpose Twitter hashtag. And to me, that represents when you're putting together your Wi-Fi network, whether you're designing it, you're testing it, or you're validating it, do it with purpose, right? Have an intent of what you're trying to do instead of willy-nilly placing, just APs on a map. So Wi-Fi with Purpose is kind of the hashtag. So sometimes when you create rate limits or you throw up CAFTA portal pages or you create some sort of barrier for your users to get access to the network resources, users will find an easier way to get around it. Okay, so in this, we look at an electronic circuit. You put up a small bit of resistance. Users are going to try find a way around that. Right? If you're putting a rate limit on them, they can't leverage the applications they want to use. Either they'll try to connect to a different SSID, disable Wi-Fi, flip to cellular if they have unlimited plans, but they'll try to find a way to get around that. So even if you have the best intentions, you put together a well-intended design, you want to enforce a security policy where you're authenticating your users connecting to your network, you have some sort of barrier or obstacle that you want them to go through. If it's too much of a hassle or too much of a burden for users, they'll find a way around that. Right? So if you throttle them back too much, users will find another way to get to their resources. Okay? And last night, over supper, we had a lot of interesting discussions. We were drawing images and pictures on white paper, and one of the people at the table started quoting movies. And so I thought, what's an interesting way that you can upset the most number of people with one phrase? All right, so some people will be able to laugh at this, but I'm sure some people in this room, this is really going to bother them. Right? They're going to be irritated for the rest of this presentation because of this. Okay. We also talked about supper, how I'm sure many of you guys in this room have experienced this. Whereas you're walking through malls, airports, hotels, you're staring at the ceiling. Right? As Wi-Fi professionals, we're looking for access points in the ceilings, and we're trained to look up. But I spend a lot of time looking at vehicles, and I imagine vehicles as packets moving through the network. And I watch how they flow through streets, different expressways, the slower ways that you have. And I imagine, the larger vehicles, the buses and the trucks are the larger frames in my network. You have your smaller packets, so the bulk of your network traffic is these smaller cars. And then you can have beacons or management and control frames, which could be motorcycles squeezing in between those packets, doing the functions that they need to do. And then how does traffic merge? Or if you're in the lineups that we have for lunch, studying just how queuing mechanisms work. What's the most effective method to queue people and packets through your network? So I just look at that, think about it, wonder if there's ways that we can do better things in our designs and our networks. Hey, so why this talk that I'm going to talking about rate limiting? First, often, hotels, common scenario, you have undersized internet pipes. One way that administrators like to control this is by enforcing rate limiting. They think if we rate limit the number of users, it'll be more fair for all of our users, and they'll get a better experience. You also have bandwidth-hungry users, right? You want to control those users, so they're not penalizing and consuming traffic from your other users. Depending on the applications that are being used, some are more hungry than others. And we may design our network today, but tomorrow a new application is released, or it's modified and behaves differently. All of a sudden, your Facebook feeds are loading videos in real time. So the bandwidth consumption of those applications can change overnight, and now our network design is no longer valid and current. Okay. Also, to set the stage here, I just wanted to talk really briefly about the OSI model, which I hope all of you in this room are familiar with, the 7 layers of the OSI model. And of course, because this is a wireless conference, wireless deals with the bottom 2 layers. And just to make this more comfortable for you guys, I kind of color-coded it, so it should look like some of your site survey designs, so you guys kind of ease into that. But I'm not sure if you guys are aware that there's actually 10 layers in this model. Okay, so if we expand this out to 10 layers, layer 8 is the management layer. Okay, this is when the management team gets involved. They can try to provide some insight. They feel compelled and driven to provide commentary on how they can influence and change. They like to think they're making your design better. This is potentially also where the legal layer comes in. So legal teams, this could be the reason why you have a captive portal. From their perspective, in their professional opinion, they mitigate the legal risk of their company by having a captive portals. Or you could have other legal teams that don't think it impacts their legal risk at all, so they decide not to have a captive portal page. But this layer will drive your design. Layer 9 is the financial layer. Okay, these are the ones that report back to your stock or to the shareholders. They control the purse strings of the project. they can drive a lot of change into which access points you can purchase, how aggressive you need to be in negotiating the sales and the purchase and your subscriptions and support going forward. But the last layer, probably one of the most important layers in Wi-Fi, is layer 10. That's where the aesthetics committee comes into place. Generally, I find these are the people that don't appreciate the beauty of access points. Okay, Carter wasn't able to be here, but he did provide me kind of a sneak preview of one of the skins that they're working on for their antennas that he mentioned yesterday. So this could satisfy the requirements of the aesthetics committee, depending on how you want to cloak and camouflage your antennas. But they can influence and they can make and break your RF design. So if you engage this committee too late, and they have the power to dictate and drive where you place access points, things can really change. So here's just a simple network topology, just to kind of put us on the same framework here. You have different layer 2 segments, right? So if you're old enough to remember the days of X25 and frame relay, X25 did error correction on every link. On a hop-by-hop basis, you did error correction, whereas frame relay did end-to-end error correction. Okay, so people thought you'd get great speeds and performance by moving from X25 to frame relay because you didn't have all the acknowledgements. But when they upgraded to frame relay, they used the same physical infrastructure, which at the time wasn't very reliable. And so now a lot of frames were failing end-to-end that have to get retransmitted. So in the initial days of frame relay, often the links were much slower. And then if we look at the layer 3 segments, our station here between the router has its IP addresses, and then we have a layer 3 on the other side. But layer 4, our segments, is really where we're concerned about, and this is where we're going to apply the rate limiting. Okay, and then everything in the cloud here, this could be a combination of a whole bunch of different technologies. We don't really care what's set up in the cloud. TCP itself, it has a back-off mechanism built into itself. So when you start flooding your TCP frames, when they start being dropped, thrown into the bit bucket, TCP adjusts the window size to start slowing down the traffic. So TCP will naturally start regulating that traffic for you. So this is one aggressive mechanism of doing it, is TCP tries to ramp up as fast as it can, and then quickly gets dropped off. So you get this kind of a sawtooth form. Okay. Here's just another method of how you can adjust TCP. But I did some performance testing. And what I would really emphasize in this point is when I put on rate limiting, although I can adjust the rate of my TCP flows through my network, my data rates from the Wi-Fi perspective remain at the higher data rates. So some people have decided that, hey, if I put on a 5 meg rate limit, why not disable all of my high Wi-Fi data rates? Because if I'm only going to push 5 megs, why do I need to transmit it, 200 megs, 450 megs? Why not shut that off? But I'd say leave those high data rates on. You want your transmissions between your station and your access point to go through the airways as quickly as possible, so reduce the amount of airtime you make. Right? So this is kind of the main point of this presentation that I want to make. Here's just a duty cycle shot. When I'm sending unlimited throughputs, I'm consuming a lot of the airtime for my frames being sent, but when I apply the rate limiting, I'm sending less frames, but they're still going out at the higher data rates. So just some configuration guidelines. Never tweak your 11A or 11N, AC, or AX rates. Always leave those kind of default settings for the manufacturer. You guys might know what these are. So this is Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6, just so you guys know what I'm talking about here. Leave those higher data rates on. And I always like to have a starting point. I like to start at 6 megabits per second, and then based on the network requirements for that particular design, move on from there. Right? So it's always kind of depending. And on that note, disassociate.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.